My name is Mara Ellis. I'm 34 years old. I'm a software architect in Charlotte, North Carolina. And on the night I got married, my aunt looked across the reception hall and told the table next to her, loud enough that I heard every syllable, that I had married for money and that the whole family always knew it would come to this. I was standing 10 feet away in my wedding dress, holding a glass I had not touched. I did not move. I did not answer. I had spent 12 years building something they had never once asked about, and I had made one decision walking into that room. I was going to let my husband speak first. He picked up the microphone 20 minutes later and told 200 people the real story, what he said into that microphone, and what happened to every person at those tables after, is the part none of them were ready for. If your own family ever looked at everything you built and decided the only explanation was that someone else must have built it for you, this one is for you. Welcome back to Revenge Cold Stories. Drop your first name and your city in the comments and subscribe before we go any further. Stay with me, because what my husband said into that microphone is something I still hear people quote. Now let me take you back to before the reception, before the wedding, before the engagement dinner and the group chat message and the phone call 2 weeks before the ceremony, back to the cracked laptop on a shelf in my home office that started everything. There is a laptop on a shelf in my office, old. The hinge cracked at the left corner sometime during my second year of building on it, and I held it together with electrical tape because I did not have money for a replacement and I was not going to stop for a repair. The tape is still there. I have bought 4 laptops since. The tape has never been replaced. That laptop is not displayed. It does not sit under a light or on a stand or in a frame. It sits on the shelf the way a tool sits when you are done with it but not ready to throw it away. I do not need to explain it to anyone. It was the first thing I ever built on, and it will be the last thing I part with, and that is the whole of its significance. I wrote my first product on that laptop at 23 in a 1-bedroom apartment in Charlotte. The apartment had carpet that had been installed in a different decade and a kitchen window that did not fully close, and a heating system that required negotiation in January. I worked at a tech company during the day and built my own product from 9 in the evening until 2 or 3 in the morning, depending on where the problem was and how close I was to the solution. I am a software architect. I think in systems. I see the load-bearing structures of things before I see their surfaces, and I have been this way since I was 19 years old writing code in my college dorm room because something about the logic of it felt more honest than most other things I had encountered. I sold the first product at 27 for enough money to know the second one would be bigger. I built the second one. By 32, I had more money than anyone in my family knew existed. I had told none of them, not from secrecy exactly, from the specific exhaustion of knowing how the conversation would end. In my family, money was a topic that resolved itself in one of 2 ways, either into debt, which was its natural state, or into asking, which was what happened when someone learned you had more than they expected. I had watched this dynamic operate for 30 years, and I had decided the cleanest position was the one I had been in since I was 19, which was building quietly and saying nothing until there was something worth saying. There was always something worth saying, I just had not said it yet. My Aunt Patricia is 61 years old and has been the family's social authority for as long as I can remember. She is not cruel in the way of someone who intends harm. She is certain in the way of someone who has built a framework over 60 years and has found it reliable enough that she has stopped checking whether it still applies. In Patricia's framework, women in the family who access wealth do so through attachment. She did this herself at 25, and she considers it practical wisdom rather than limitation. She looked at me dating Daniel Ashworth, a man whose family name appears on buildings in 3 states, and she saw a pattern she recognized. She did not see a woman who had been managing her own investment portfolio for 3 years before she met him. She saw herself at 25 making a strategic choice, and she approved of the choice while being entirely wrong about what she was approving. That is the specific quality of Patricia's blind spot. It is not malicious. It is misidentification. She looked at me and saw a reflection. She was completely wrong and completely certain, And there is almost nothing more dangerous in a family than that combination. My cousin Ryan is 36. He has built his entire identity around being the family's financial success story. Regional sales manager, leased BMW, opinions about investment portfolios delivered at family dinners to people who have not asked for them. Ryan's mockery of my relationship with Daniel was not random. It was insurance. If the family accepted the narrative that I had married for money, the alternative explanation, that I had built more than Ryan on my own before I was 33, never had to be considered. He was protecting a category he had spent 15 years winning by making sure I could not be placed in it. My mother runs on avoidance. She does not say the cruel things. She laughs softly when others say them, the particular laugh of someone who needs the loudest voice in the room not to turn toward her. She has seen my apartment. She has noticed the shelf. She has registered details she has chosen not to assemble into a conclusion because the conclusion would require her to contradict Patricia, and she has not done that in 30 years. She knows more than she admits. I have understood this for years. I have been waiting for her to understand it about herself. Daniel and I met at a conference in Atlanta 2 years before the wedding. He was presenting on infrastructure investment, and I was attending a session on Series A architecture, and we ended up at the same dinner table afterward and spent 3 hours in a conversation that kept finding new rooms to move into. He was easy in the way of someone who has never needed to perform his own significance. He asked questions and listened to the answers with the attention of someone who is genuinely curious rather than waiting to speak. On our 4th date, he asked about my work in enough detail that I had to decide whether to give him the surface version or the actual one. I gave him the actual one. He listened for 40 minutes and asked 3 follow-up questions that told me he had understood the substance and not just the shape. He said, at the end of it, that he had been trying to solve a similar structural problem in one of his family's development projects for 8 months, and that my approach was cleaner than anything his team had tried. That was the moment I knew he was different from what my family would eventually decide he was. He did not see a woman from a different tax bracket who had gotten lucky. He saw a systems architect who had solved a problem he had not been able to solve. The order of that matters. The order is everything. 3 months before the wedding, his family arranged a formal introduction dinner at my parents' house. My mother had the good china out. My father had ironed his shirt twice. The tablecloth was the one reserved for occasions requiring the impression of a different household than the one that actually existed there on regular Tuesdays. Daniel arrived in a car that cost more than the house. He walked in with the ease of someone who does not need to announce himself and spent the first 15 minutes asking my father about the garden and meaning it. My father, who had not been asked about his garden by anyone outside the family in recent memory, spent 12 of those 15 minutes answering. Before dinner was served, Patricia found me in the kitchen. She came in softly, the way she moved when she had something to deliver that she had decided was wisdom rather than judgment. She stood beside the counter and looked at me with the warmth of a woman about to help. She said men like Daniel did not end up with girls like us unless we made it worth their while. She said it gently. She said girls like us with the casual certainty of someone who had been using the phrase for 40 years. She said I should just make sure I knew what the arrangement actually was. Not hostile. Counsel. The cruelty wrapped so thoroughly in warmth that it required a moment to locate the edge of it. Girls like us. The phrase that contained my entire family's operating theory about itself, that people from where we came from did not build things. They attached themselves to things. That building was not an available option for girls like us. I stood in my mother's kitchen in the dress I had bought for this dinner, and I felt the electrical tape on the shelf in my office 12 miles away, like a physical pressure against my sternum. I said nothing. I went back to the table and put my hand on Daniel's arm. He was mid-sentence with my father about drainage systems and did not pause, but he turned his hand briefly and covered mine for a moment before returning to the conversation. He had not heard what Patricia said. He did not need to. He already knew what I had built. The engagement announcement went into the family group chat on a Sunday evening. Congratulations from relatives who did not know Daniel's last name. heart emojis from people who had not spoken to me in 2 years. Then Ryan's message arrived, a link to an article, the kind published by entertainment sites about wealthy men and the lifestyle choices of the women who married them. One line of commentary beneath the link. LOL, just saying, do your research, sis. Patricia liked it within 4 minutes. 3 other relatives within the hour. My mother sent a separate private message. Don't mind them. They're just surprised. You know how this family is. I read the thread from my desk. On the screen in front of me was the architecture document for the product I was currently building. The one that would close its Series B in 6 weeks at a number that would require Ryan to recalibrate several of his dinner party opinions if he ever learned it. I did not respond to the thread. I opened a note in my phone and typed what Ryan had said and the time he had said it. By the day of the wedding, that note had 15 entries. I went back to the architecture document. The system had a load-bearing problem in the 3rd layer, and I had been close to the solution for 2 days. I found it that evening at 11:40 and fixed it in 40 minutes and sat back in my chair and looked at the cracked laptop on the shelf and thought about Patricia's phrase, "Girls like us." Girls like us built this, Patricia. Girls like us have been building this since before you started telling us we couldn't. The Series B closed on a Thursday, 6 weeks before the wedding. 4 lawyers at a conference table downtown, a term sheet that had taken 11 months to negotiate, and a number in the closing documents that I had not told my family about because my family did not know the company existed. I signed the final page at 3:17 in the afternoon. The lawyer across from me offered his hand and said, "Congratulations. This is a significant close." I shook it and thanked him and gathered my copy of the documents and walked to the parking garage and sat in my car for a few minutes before starting the engine. Not from overwhelm, from the specific stillness that follows the completion of something you have been building toward for a long time. The stillness of a calculation that has resolved, the system working exactly as designed. I thought about Patricia's girls like us. I thought about Ryan's link in the group chat and the 4 minutes it had taken her to like it. I started the car and drove home and made dinner and did not tell anyone. 2 weeks before the wedding, a phone call arrived from a woman named Joanna. Joanna had been my friend in the loose sense of a friendship that develops over years of proximity without ever becoming fully chosen. She had known my family since we were teenagers and had drifted into their orbit in the way that some people drift, gradually and then permanently, until it is difficult to say whether the friendship is with you or with the version of you the family presents. She called on a Wednesday evening and asked if she could ask me something. The phrasing itself was information. People who ask whether they can ask something have already decided to ask it and are constructing an ethical framework around the asking. She said she had been hearing things from the family. She said she cared about me. She said she just wanted to make sure I was going in with clear eyes. Clear eyes, as if the woman who had been reading financial statements and negotiating term sheets and managing a portfolio for 3 years needed someone to suggest she think carefully about money. I thanked her. I kept my voice even. I told her I appreciated the call. After I hung up, I opened the note in my phone. 15 entries. I put the phone down and looked at the cracked laptop on the shelf and thought about the word arrangement, which was what Patricia had called it in the kitchen at my parents' house. The arrangement. As if what I had built across 12 years of 2 a.m. deploys and term sheet negotiations and load-bearing problems solved in the quiet of an empty office was not a life constructed from work, but a position acquired through proximity. I was going to let Daniel speak. I had decided this before Joanna called. The decision had arrived quietly during the week after Ryan's message, the way decisions arrive when you have been considering a question long enough that the answer stops feeling like a choice and starts feeling like a fact. Daniel had asked me once, sitting at my kitchen table with the architecture documents between us and the cracked laptop visible on the shelf behind me, whether I wanted to correct the family before the wedding or let it land at the wedding. I had thought about it for 4 days. I told him, let it land. He had nodded the way he nodded when he had understood something and had no need to add to it, like a man checking a weather forecast for a flight he intends to make regardless. I called my accountant on a Friday morning. His name was Gordon, and he had been managing my accounts for 4 years, with the precise, unhurried competence of someone who understands that his job is to make complicated things legible to the people who need to act on them. I asked him for a 1-page summary, clean, dated, irrefutable, my net worth as of the date of the wedding. He said he could have it by end of day. I told him to send it to the office, not the house. He did not ask why. Gordon never asked about things that were not his to ask about. It was one of his best professional qualities. The document arrived at 4:15. I printed it, folded it once, and put it in the desk drawer beside the cracked laptop. Not to use, to know it existed. There is a specific quality of steadiness that comes from having documentation you do not need to produce because the truth will surface without it, but which you keep anyway, because you were taught that records are how things survive. My father had taught me that with a level and a load-bearing wall. My 12 years of building had taught me the rest. The final dress fitting was on a Saturday. I went alone because I had not asked anyone to come and no one had offered, which told me something about the current geometry of my family relationships that I filed without comment. The seamstress was a woman named Rosa, who had been doing alterations for 30 years and who worked in the specific focused quiet of someone whose skill required concentration rather than conversation. She made 2 adjustments. She stepped back and looked at the result. She asked if I was excited. I said yes and meant it completely. On the drive home, I thought about the earrings I had chosen for the wedding, my grandmother's, small, plain, not expensive. I had selected them specifically because they had nothing to do with Daniel's money or mine. They were the only thing I would be wearing on that day that had existed before any of this, before the products and the sales and the Series B and the 14 entries in my phone. They were just small gold circles that had belonged to a woman who had worked hard and loved her family and left behind almost nothing except these earrings and the quality of attention she brought to everything she touched. I put them in my ears in the parking lot of the seamstress's studio and looked at myself in the rearview mirror. I thought, I built this, every part of it. They just don't know it yet. Daniel and I had one conversation about what the family was saying. One. He did not need to be told twice about anything that mattered, and he understood that repeated conversations about the same wound were a form of picking at it. We were in my kitchen on a Tuesday evening, dinner done, his hand around a coffee cup. I told him about Patricia's kitchen conversation and Ryan's message and Joanna's call and the 14 entries in my phone. He listened the way he always listened, with the full weight of his attention directed at what I was actually saying, rather than what he was going to say when I finished. When I was done, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said one thing. He said, they have no idea what they're sitting next to, not with anger, with the specific tone of someone stating a fact they find both accurate and somewhat baffling. I said, no, they don't. He said, do you want to tell them? I said I had been thinking about it. He said, whenever you decide, I'm ready to say whatever needs to be said. That was the conversation. 3 exchanges, the whole of what needed to be said between 2 people who understood each other well enough to leave the rest of the space quiet. The morning of the wedding, Patricia arrived at the dressing room early. She had not been asked to arrive early. She arrived early in the way that people arrive early to things when they have decided the occasion is theirs to manage. She sat in the corner and offered observations. The venue was beautiful, she said. Daniel had really done all this. She said it the way she said everything, with the warm certainty of someone who had assembled the correct narrative and was now simply narrating it, as if the venue was his production. As if the 200 people in the hall below and the flowers and the catering and every decision that had shaped the day had been paid for by someone other than me. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, the dress, my grandmother's earrings, the cracked laptop on its shelf 12 miles away. I thought about Daniel's question. Before or at the wedding, I thought about the 1-page summary in my desk drawer. I thought about the note in my phone with 15 entries. Something settled in my chest. Not anger, not anticipation. The feeling a structure makes when the last load-bearing piece is placed and the whole thing holds. I did not know exactly what Daniel was going to say. I only knew he was going to say something. And I had decided, in that dressing room mirror, with Patricia still offering observations from her corner, that I was ready for whatever the room did when he did. The reception was 200 people in a hall that had the specific warmth of a large space well lit and well filled. White linens, round tables. The family clustered near the center, 3 tables arranged close together in the way families arrange themselves at weddings, building their own territory within the larger space. Patricia was at the center table, Ryan beside her with his wife. My mother 2 seats down, between my aunt and a cousin who had liked the message in the group chat within the hour. The friend who had called about clear eyes was 2 tables over, close enough to the family cluster that the line between the groups was more suggestion than division. I moved through the room during the first hour with the ease of someone who has hosted events and understands that the host's job is presence rather than performance. Daniel was across the room talking to his brother, holding a champagne glass with the relaxed grip of someone who is exactly where he wants to be. I watched Patricia from across the room without appearing to watch her. She was warm, expansive, the social authority of the evening operating at full capacity, holding court at the center table with the energy of someone who has decided this occasion belongs to her understanding of it. At some point near the end of the first hour, I was standing 10 feet from the family cluster, speaking to a colleague who had flown in from San Francisco for the wedding, when Patricia's voice carried across the space between us. She did not know I could hear her, or she did not consider it a problem if I could. She said to the table with the warmth of someone sharing a piece of wisdom they have been holding, "She married well. Give her that." The table responded, laughter. The soft, knowing laughter of people who have been told they are right about something they already believed. The table beside them heard it. I heard it from 10 feet away in my wedding dress, holding a glass I had not touched. I did not move. I looked at Daniel across the room. He had heard it. I could tell from the small shift in his posture, the way a man's attention reorients when something has happened that he has been expecting and is now ready to address. He set his champagne glass on the table beside him. He caught the eye of the DJ. He walked to the front of the room. He picked up the microphone. The room did not go immediately quiet. It went quiet the way rooms go quiet when someone at the front has a quality of presence that makes you understand before they have said anything that what is coming requires your attention. 200 people turned toward the front of the hall. Daniel stood in front of them without clearing his throat, without the smile of a man about to make a predictable toast, with the ease of a man who has checked the forecast and decided to fly. He said, "I want to tell you something about my wife." The room was fully quiet now. He said, "Because I have been hearing a story tonight that is not true, and I think the people telling it deserve to hear the right one." He started with the cracked laptop. He described it the way I had described it to him at my kitchen table 6 months earlier. The hinge, the electrical tape, the shelf, the specific quality of a tool that has done its work and is kept not for display but for what it represents about the person who used it. He told them about the first product, the 1-bedroom apartment, 23 years old, working until 2 in the morning after a full day at a company that did not know she was building something that would make it look small. He told them about the sale at 27. He told them about the second company and the third. He said the Series B. He named the number, plainly without drama, directly into the microphone, to 200 people, including everyone who had liked Ryan's message and everyone who had used the phrase "girls like us" and everyone who had called 2 weeks before the ceremony to ask about clear eyes. He said the number the way you state a measurement, because that is what it was. A measurement of 12 years of 2 in the morning, and load-bearing problems solved, and term sheets negotiated, and systems built in the specific quiet of someone who has decided that the work is the whole point and the recognition will arrive when it arrives. Then he said the last thing. He said that when they met, she had been managing her own portfolio for 3 years. He said his first question, when he understood what she had built, was whether she would ever consider letting him be part of it. He said, "I did not marry a woman who needed my money. I married a woman who had already built more than I had by the time she was 30. I just had to convince her I was worth the investment." He set the microphone down. He walked back to me. He took my hand. The room was completely silent for 4 full seconds. The silence lasted 4 seconds. I counted them, not from anxiety, from the same instinct that makes me count load times and iteration cycles and the specific number of seconds a system takes to return a result. Some part of my mind always measuring 4 seconds of 200 people absorbing a recalibration they had not prepared for. Then the room broke, not with applause exactly, with the specific sound of a large space reorganizing itself around new information, chairs shifting, conversations starting in low registers, the sound of people leaning toward each other to confirm that they had heard what they thought they heard. Daniel's hand was in mine. I did not look at Patricia's table. I looked at Daniel. He was watching the room with the calm expression of a man who has deployed something accurate and is now simply waiting for the environment to adjust to it. Not triumphant, not performing, just present. I said one thing to him, quietly enough that only he could hear it. I said, "Thank you." He turned to look at me. He said, "I've been waiting to say that since the engagement dinner." The room's reorganization produced a specific geography. The people who had known about my work, colleagues, professional contacts, 3 people from the Series B closing who had come because they had been part of something significant and wanted to be present for the next thing, moved toward us. Not in a rush, with the easy movement of people who have been given permission to be in a conversation they were already equipped for. The family cluster stayed in its territory near the center tables. I watched this happen without moving toward either group. Patricia was looking at her hands. Ryan had said something low to his wife. His wife had not responded. She was looking at the front of the room with the expression of someone reassessing a significant amount of prior context. My mother was looking at me, not with the performed warmth she deployed at family occasions, with something more stripped down, the expression of a woman who has been registering details for years and has just been handed the framework that makes them cohere. She looked at me for a long moment, then she looked at her hands. The friend who had called about clear eyes found me near the bar 40 minutes after Daniel's speech. She started a sentence. I finished it for her. I said, "You don't have to." "I know." She looked at me with the expression of someone who has been caught in the middle of an apology they are not sure they have earned. I moved on before it could be completed. Incomplete apologies are also data. Not cruelty on my part, just accuracy. She had called 2 weeks before my wedding to suggest that a woman who had been managing her own portfolio for 3 years might want to think carefully about money. The apology she was constructing was designed to restore our friendship to its previous state. I was not interested in the previous state. I was interested in whatever came next, which would be built on what had actually happened, rather than on a mutual agreement to revise it. I found my grandmother's earrings in my reflection in the window near the bar. Small, plain, not expensive. They had been the right choice. Patricia approached near the end of the evening. I had known she would. She was the family's social authority, and the evening had produced a public revision of a narrative she had been maintaining for 2 years, and she was not the kind of woman who absorbed that quietly. She was the kind of woman who managed situations. She would have spent the last 2 hours composing her approach. She found me near the edge of the room, away from the main gathering, in the brief window when I was standing alone. She had composed herself fully. Her expression was the expression she wore when she had decided that the correct posture was dignity rather than defense. She began with, "I had no idea." I let her get 3 sentences in. Then quietly, without moving, I told her that she had said women like us have to make it worth their while. I told her I wanted her to know that I had never once had to make anything worth anything for anyone. I told her I built it. That was all. I did not raise my voice. I did not wait for the response. I turned back toward the room where my husband was laughing at something his brother had said. Behind me, Patricia was quiet. I did not turn around to measure the quality of the quiet. I already knew what it contained. The honeymoon was a week in Portugal. On the 3rd evening, we were at a restaurant on a hillside, and Daniel was looking at the menu with the focused attention he brought to everything he found worth understanding, and I was looking at the harbor below us in the late light, and I thought about the reception hall and the 4 seconds of silence and the note in my phone with 15 entries. I thought about the cracked laptop on the shelf at home. I thought about 23 years old and 2 in the morning and a hinge held together with electrical tape because there was no budget for the replacement and no intention of stopping for the repair. Daniel looked up from the menu and found me looking at the harbor. Without any preamble, as if continuing a conversation we had been having in the space between us since the reception, he said, "You know what I keep thinking about?" I waited. He said, "Your mother's face." After the speech, before she looked at her hands. I said, "What about it?" He said, "She knew. She had always known. She just hadn't said it." I had thought this too. I had been carrying it since the reception, without articulating it because some truths require the right moment to be spoken aloud, and Portugal on a hillside with the harbor below us and 12 years of work behind me felt like the right moment. I said, "I know." He said, "Are you going to give her the chance to say it?" I thought about the Sunday calls, the ironed tablecloth, the questions she had asked about my apartment that were smaller than the questions she could have asked if she had been willing to assemble what she had observed into a conclusion. I said, "She'll find her own way to say it. I'll be there when she does." He went back to the menu. I went back to the harbor. The fallout organized itself in the weeks after we returned. Patricia did not call for 3 weeks. When she called, she did not apologize directly. She asked how I was doing. Her voice had the quality of someone who has revised a significant operating assumption and is still feeling the architecture of the revision. The warmth was present, but it was different warmth, less certain, more careful. I answered her question. I asked about her garden. The call lasted 6 minutes. We have not discussed the wedding since. The family has not either, at least not in front of me. The silence on the subject is its own data point. The note in my phone has not been updated since the reception. I consider it closed. Ryan deleted the message from the group chat 2 days after the wedding. Not the conversation, just his message. As if removing the link could revise the 4 minutes it had taken Patricia to like it. The group chat went quiet for a month. When it came back, it was smaller. Ryan's opinions about investment portfolios appear less frequently at family gatherings now. He has not mentioned Daniel's name in the 18 months since. I have noticed this without commenting on it. Some people's consequences are simply a quieting. The category they have been winning disappears from the conversation, and they have to find another one. My mother called the Sunday after we returned from Portugal. She did not mention Patricia. She did not mention Daniel's speech. She asked about the honeymoon and whether the food had been what I expected and whether the flowers at the reception had been the ones I had chosen or a substitution. Small questions. The questions of someone paying close attention to the details that belong to me rather than the details that belong to her framework. I answered every question. She asked whether the laptop was still on the shelf. I stopped. It was the first time she had ever referenced the laptop directly. She had seen it on the shelf every time she visited my office. She had registered it and filed it in the category of things she had observed, but not assembled. And now, on a Sunday morning call a week after her daughter's husband had named the laptop into a reception hall in front of 200 people, she was asking about it directly. I said yes. "Still there," she said. "I should have asked about it sooner." She said it the way people say things, when they have finally located the honest version of something they have been circling for a long time. I said, "Yes, you should have." She did not fill the silence that followed with a deflection. She let it be what it was. I considered that progress. We talked for 40 minutes. She asked about the Series B, not because she fully understood what a Series B was, because she was willing to ask about something she did not understand, rather than continuing to manage her understanding of me from a safe distance. I explained it. She listened. She asked one follow-up question that was specific rather than general. It was the most honest conversation we had in 10 years, and I am not sure she fully understood why. Daniel still does not understand the cracked laptop. Not the fact of it. He understood the fact of it from the moment I described it. He understands that it was the first thing I built on, and that it will be the last thing I part with. What he does not understand is why the electrical tape has never been replaced. I have explained it twice, once at the kitchen table and once in Portugal. He accepts the explanation each time without requiring it to make sense to him in the same way it makes sense to me. He has said, both times, that it seems like something that matters in a way he can see but not fully enter. I told him that is exactly right, and that being willing to say so is one of the reasons I married him. He said that was a very architectural way to describe a marriage. I said I was a software architect. He said fair enough and went back to whatever he was reading. The cracked laptop is still on the shelf. The tape has not been replaced. 4 laptops since. The tape the same. There is a new item on the shelf beside it. A framed photograph that Daniel put there 3 weeks after the wedding without asking, which was the correct approach because asking would have made it a negotiation rather than a statement. The photograph is from the reception, not the speech. After the speech, the moment when Daniel had set the microphone down and walked back to me and taken my hand, someone's camera had caught it from across the room at the angle that showed both of us. And also, slightly out of focus in the background, the center tables where the family cluster sat. You cannot read anyone's expression in the background. They are too far away and too soft. But you can see the room, the full room, 200 people, and the particular quality of a space in which something true has just been said and has not yet finished landing. I look at the photograph sometimes when I sit down at my desk. Not often. I do not need to look at it often. My family decided I had married for money. They decided this through 2 years of messages and kitchen conversations and phone calls and a group chat link that took Patricia 4 minutes to like. On the night of my wedding, my aunt said I had married well in front of 3 tables and I was standing 10 feet away. My husband picked up a microphone and told 200 people about a cracked laptop and a 1-bedroom apartment and a Series B that had closed 6 weeks before the ceremony. The room was silent for 4 seconds. Patricia did not call for 3 weeks. Ryan deleted his message. My mother asked about the laptop on the Sunday call and listened to the answer for the first time. That is the whole story. Now here is what I want to leave with you. There is a specific kind of erasure that happens when the people around you decide that your life requires an explanation other than the one you built. They are not always cruel. Patricia was not cruel. She was certain. She had a framework that had served her for 60 years, and she applied it to me with the genuine warmth of someone passing down hard-won wisdom. The framework was wrong. The certainty was the problem, not the warmth. When someone is both certain and wrong about who you are, no amount of correction will shift them. Correction operates on the assumption that the other person is holding the wrong conclusion because they are missing information. But Patricia was not missing information. She was declining to assemble the information she had into the conclusion it supported. You cannot correct your way out of that. You can only build. Build until the evidence is large enough that it speaks without you having to say anything. Build until the person who has been waiting to tell the room the real story can say the number into a microphone, and the room goes quiet for 4 seconds. The work is the answer. It has always been the answer. They called me a gold digger at my own wedding. They were 12 years too late to be right about anything. Tell me in the comments your first name and your city. Tell me if someone has ever looked at everything you built and decided the only explanation was that someone else must have handed it to you. Tell me if you kept building anyway. For more stories like this one, come find us on the channel. Every story here is about someone who was misread by the people closest to them and kept working until the image was impossible to misread.